My name is Emma, and I'm 34 years old. If you had told me a few years ago that the very family I built my life around would one day exile me from a wedding I single-handedly paid for, I would have laughed in disbelief. But that's exactly what happened. My younger sister Maya, the girl I once defended from bullies, the one whose scraped knees I patched up as a child, looked me in the eye and through my own mother's trembling fingers on a phone screen told me I wasn't welcome at her wedding. Not just unwelcome, uninvited. After I had already wired over $100,000 to make that day possible. It happened in the most surreal way. I was in the middle of a quarterly board review, my presentation slides glowing across a polished mahogany table when my phone buzzed in my lap. I had sworn I'd silenced it. One buzz, then another, then a third. The CEO paused his notes, all eyes turned toward me. Flustered, I excused myself and stepped into the corridor. And there it was, a text from my mother written in block capitals as if volume could pierce straight through my chest. "You're not invited. Maya doesn't want you there." I froze. The words didn't make sense. I paid for the venue. I signed the contracts for the band, the florists, even the absurd 5-tier cake Maya had insisted on. Every deposit was linked to my account. My stomach tightened, but my mind went still in a strange, icy calm. Not anger, not sadness, calm. The kind you only feel in the eye of a hurricane. Without a single reply, I opened my email, found the contract thread with the venue, and typed one sentence. "Please cancel all services booked under my name. Effective immediately." Then I pressed send. I walked back into the boardroom with the perfect composure of a woman who had just declared war. Driving home that night, memories surged like unwanted guests in my mind. I remembered being 12, crouched on the phone with a plumber at midnight because a pipe had burst, and my mother had collapsed in panic. Maya, only 10 then, was shut away in her room, music blasting, never lifting a finger. At 16, it was me again, whispering into the receiver to negotiate with the electric company after my father forgot once more to pay the bill. Responsibility wasn't a choice in my life, it was the reflex that had shaped me into armor. That armor had carried me through college scholarships and the sale of my own tech startup. It made me wealthy. And with wealth came requests. A new car for my father, mortgage relief for my mother, security deposits for Maya after she trashed yet another apartment. And I never said no, because family I thought was sacred. So when Maya called at midnight one night, squealing about her engagement to Caleb, I barely hesitated before asking how I could help. She said it would be just a few deposits. But within weeks, she and my mother were unrolling a spreadsheet in my living room that looked like the annual budget of a Fortune 500 company. The number at the bottom, $120,000. I should have said no, but their eyes, the quiet pressure in the silence, told me this wasn't a suggestion. This was obligation dressed as love. And I complied. Wire transfers, rush deposits, endless receipts cataloged neatly in a folder on my laptop. I told myself this grand gesture would finally win me a place at the family table. Instead, I found myself cut out. Cake tastings. I only discovered from Facebook posts. A bridal group chat I was quietly removed from because, as Maya left in a voicemail, it's getting too cluttered with vendor talk. The final straw came on an ordinary Tuesday. I'd gone to pay the florist in person, a silly sentimental habit to make myself feel included. From the back room, I heard Maya's voice, sharp and cold. God, she just makes everything about her. It's my wedding, not her business acquisition. Honestly, I just wish she'd send the money and stay out of it. It was like being punched in the ribs. The air rushed out of me. That night, staring at my ceiling, the pain turned into something else, clarity. I realized this wasn't love. This was a transaction, and I had been a fool to confuse the two. So I decided I wouldn't just take my money back. I would wait. I would let them build their castle brick by brick on the foundation of my sacrifice. And when the time came, I would pull every stone out from beneath their feet. My strategy shifted. No longer a sister, but a CEO cleaning up a bad investment. I documented everything: invoices, screenshots, whispered lies. Until finally, one conversation with the caterer revealed the last betrayal: that my family had told vendors I was going through a difficult patch and shouldn't be contacted. They weren't just using me, they were rewriting me as unstable, unfit, a shadow to be pitied. That was when I knew this wasn't just about money anymore. This was about dignity, about the worth of my own name. And I promised myself they would see the truth whether they wanted to or not. The night of the rehearsal dinner was when everything came to a head. I had planned it, funded it, and even chosen the restaurant myself, a sky-high venue overlooking the city, with candles dripping wax into golden holders and champagne glasses clinking in a rhythm that felt almost mechanical. My family floated through the room with their usual rehearsed smiles, carefully constructed personas meant to impress Caleb's family. And me, I was the ghost hostess, the woman who paid for every shining surface, but was treated as if my presence were an inconvenience. At one point, I overheard my mother lean toward Caleb's mother, her voice pitched just high enough for me to catch. "We're just so glad Emma could make it even for a little while. She's been under so much stress." Stress. That was her word of choice, her coded phrase to mask the lie she'd been telling vendors: that I was unstable, fragile, someone to be pitied rather than respected. My hands clenched beneath the table, but outwardly I smiled, sipped my wine, and waited. When the time for toasts came, I let them go first. My father with his forced nostalgia, my mother weaving sentimental nonsense with the elegance of a politician, the maid of honor giggling through cliches. I listened, every word dripping with hypocrisy, until finally I stood. Glass in hand, smile serene. I began softly, warmly, the way a dutiful sister might. "Maya, Caleb, I wish you nothing but the best, but..." And then I twisted the knife. And I know how much effort goes into creating a perfect day. For instance, this beautiful private room, a small price at $15,000. The 5-course meal with wine pairing you're enjoying tonight, $22,000. And Maya, that stunning Vera Wang gown you'll wear tomorrow, all $8,500 of it, looked gorgeous in the photos I saw online. The room went silent. You could hear the ice melting in a glass. Maya's face drained of color, her fiancé's parents shifted uncomfortably, and my father's smile froze into something brittle. I turned my gaze to Caleb's mother, softened my tone, and with a feigned vulnerability said, "And thank you, Mrs. Peterson, for being so understanding. I'm just so relieved I've recovered from that serious mental instability my family told you about. It's truly a miracle I'm lucid enough tonight to pay the final bill." The effect was nuclear. Gasps rippled through the guests. My mother's face collapsed into horror. Maya's eyes filled with rage. And in that moment, their carefully curated facade, the fantasy wedding built on my back, cracked wide open for everyone to see. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I simply folded my napkin, placed it neatly on the table, and walked toward the exit. Behind me, I heard chairs scraping, hurried footsteps. My mother and Maya caught me at the door, faces twisted, voices hissing. "How could you do this?" Maya spat, tears streaking her cheeks. "You ruined everything." For the first time in my life, I looked at her and felt nothing. No pity, no guilt. Just the quiet, liberating emptiness of someone who had finally put down a burden they were never meant to carry. "No, Maya," I said, voice low, steady. "I gave you the wedding of your dreams. Every last detail. Consider my absence from your life starting now the second gift. We are done." I walked out into the night air, cool and clean, leaving them standing at the doorway of a world I had built but no longer belonged to, and I didn't look back. What followed was a year of silence. A year of therapy, of learning boundaries, of detangling my sense of self from the constant need to prove my worth through sacrifice. I blocked their numbers. I learned to say no. I went to the coast one weekend and turned off my phone for 7 blissful days, letting the waves drown out voices I had once mistaken for love. And then a letter came. A real one with a postage stamp. Inside 5 words in shaky handwriting. "Can we please talk? I'm sorry." It was from Maya. We met in a coffee shop, neutral ground. She looked smaller than I remembered. The sparkle of entitlement that had always lived in her eyes was gone, replaced by something hollow, exhausted. Over lukewarm cups, she told me the truth. The wedding never happened. Caleb's family had been appalled. The humiliation had shattered her, forced her to look at herself for the first time. The marriage dissolved almost immediately. She was in therapy now. She admitted, voice trembling, that she had built her entire identity on what others thought of her, and when the structure collapsed, she was left with nothing. You just had the guts, she whispered, to be the one to blow it down. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was truth. And for the first time between us, truth felt like enough. In the weeks after that coffee shop meeting, I couldn't decide whether to feel vindicated or hollow. Maya's apology sat in my chest like a weight I didn't know how to carry. I had dreamed for years of her acknowledging what she had done, admitting to the manipulation, the cruelty, the endless taking. And yet when it finally came, it didn't feel triumphant. It felt fragile, like holding the shards of a broken mirror. You can see yourself in it, but only in fractured pieces. She cried into her hands, confessing that she hadn't recognized me as a sister, but as a resource, a safety net. And maybe deep down I already knew that. I had let myself be used because saying no felt like betrayal, because being indispensable was the only way I knew how to belong. Sitting across from her, listening to her whisper apologies through trembling lips, I realized the cruelest betrayal of all wasn't hers. It was mine. My betrayal of myself. All those years I gave and gave until there was nothing left but resentment. I left the coffee shop shaken but strangely light. We didn't hug. We didn't promise to rebuild. We simply parted ways, carrying the ghost of something that used to be family. After that day, I started building a new version of my life, brick by brick, not for them, not to be worthy of a seat at their table, but for me. My apartment became a place of color and laughter, filled with mismatched chairs and people who wanted nothing but my presence. Friends who didn't need handouts or favors to justify my value. People who asked me to show up not as a provider, not as an ATM, but as Emma. And in those circles, I found my voice again. I began mentoring young women who were starting their own businesses, pouring into them the wisdom I had earned through pain. Every conversation reminded me that my worth had never been measured in dollar signs or sacrifices. I wasn't the backup plan to anyone's life. I was the blueprint of my own. One day I received a handwritten note from one of the women I mentored. She had been timid when we first met, always apologizing for her ambition, shrinking herself so others would be comfortable. In her letter, she thanked me for teaching her to take up space without guilt. Her words were simple, but they cut straight through me. You showed me that I am not the backup plan. I am the blueprint. I cried reading those words, because for so long I had been waiting for my family to validate me, to give me a seat at their table. But what I had failed to realize was that the most important table isn't one you're invited to. It's the one you build with your own hands, surrounded by people who value you simply for existing. Still, the ghosts lingered. Some nights I would wake up drenched in sweat, hearing Maya's voice in my head dripping with disdain. I just wish she'd send the money and stay out of it. Other times it was my mother's cold dismissal. She's been under so much stress. Trauma doesn't vanish with distance. It echoes, looping through your mind until you learn how to rewrite the ending. Therapy taught me that healing isn't about erasing the past. It's about reclaiming it. About looking at the scars and saying, yes, this happened, but it doesn't define me anymore. And slowly I stopped bleeding from those wounds. Slowly I began to feel whole. Months later, I heard from an old family friend that Maya was still in therapy, still untangling herself from the ruins of her choices. I didn't call. I didn't write. I wished her well in silence. That was the final step of my healing, realizing I didn't need to re-enter the cycle to prove I had forgiven. Forgiveness, I learned, is not always reconciliation. Sometimes it's simply releasing the weight so you can keep walking forward. I don't know if Maya and I will ever be close again. But I do know this. I am no longer a woman who begs for love through sacrifice. I am no longer a sister who bankrolls belonging. I am a woman who survived betrayal and rebuilt herself from ashes. And if you're listening to my story right now, maybe you've been there too. Maybe you've given until you were empty, hoping someone, anyone, would finally see you. And maybe you've felt the sting of realizing they never would. Let me tell you this, you are not the backup plan. You are not the safety net. You are not the resource or the utility. You are the blueprint of a life only you can create. Time has a strange way of softening the edges of memory. A year ago, I couldn't have said Maya's name without feeling my chest cave in, without feeling the sting of betrayal flood my veins. Now, when I think of her, I don't feel rage. I don't feel the desperate ache of longing to belong. What I feel is distance. A wide, calm distance like standing on a shoreline, watching a storm far out at sea. It may have once threatened to drown me, but now it no longer reaches my feet. That's the thing about family. We are taught from childhood that blood is thicker than water, that no matter how deep the wounds, we are bound to forgive, to return, to endure. But what no one tells you is that sometimes family becomes the knife. And if you are not careful, you will bleed yourself dry trying to prove that you deserve love. Walking away from them was the hardest thing I've ever done. For months, I battled guilt like a second skin. I replayed every scene in my head, questioning whether I was cruel for exposing them at that rehearsal dinner, whether I should have swallowed my pain and kept funding their fantasy. But the more I sat with myself, the more I realized something that changed everything. Love without respect is not love. Obligation without gratitude is not love. And any bond that demands your silence in exchange for belonging is not a bond worth keeping. I don't regret what I did that night, because in tearing down their illusion, I built the foundation of my truth. And my truth is this: I deserve relationships where I am more than my wallet. I deserve connections where I am more than the sum of my sacrifices. These days, my life is quieter, not the silence of absence, but the kind of peace that comes from knowing you no longer need to prove yourself. I cook dinners for friends. I mentor young women who remind me of myself at 20, burning with ambition, terrified of being too much. I watch them step into their power, and I see reflected in them the pieces of myself I thought I had lost forever. Every so often, I wonder if Maya will write again, if she will ever ask me for another chance, not with demands, not with manipulation, but with honesty. If that day comes, I don't know what I'll say. Maybe I'll be ready, maybe I won't. But for now, I don't live waiting for her. I live for me, and that is enough. The greatest lesson this journey gave me is simple, but it took me 34 years to learn: love is not proven through sacrifice. It is not measured by how much pain you can endure to stay close to someone. Real love, whether from family, friends, or a partner, feels safe. It feels seen. It feels like home. And if you don't have that yet, let me remind you, you can build it. You don't need an invitation to sit at someone else's table. You can build your own mismatched chairs and all, and fill it with people who see your worth without condition. So if you're listening right now, and you've ever had to choose between family and your self-worth, know that you are not alone. I've been there. I made the choice, and though it broke me open, it also set me free. If my story resonated with you, I'd love to hear yours. Have you ever had to walk away from someone you thought you couldn't live without? How did you find the strength to choose yourself? Share your story in the comments below. I read them all, and your words might be the reminder someone else needs tonight. And if this story spoke to you, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who might need to hear it, and subscribe for more stories like this one. Your support means more than you know, and it helps keep this channel alive so that we can keep having these hard, honest conversations together. Thank you for sitting with me in this truth. Thank you for listening to a story that was not easy to tell. I hope wherever you are, you remember you are not the backup plan. You are the blueprint.